Pleased to introduce you to Emma Charlesworth-Seiler. Emma is one of two women working in minor league baseball, quite the accomplishment. And we may be seeing Emma in another league someday, somewhere else, and maybe Major League Baseball, who knows? But one thing is for sure, it's a great accomplishment for Emma to be where she is, and I feel like she has her very own ingredients that have contributed to her own recipe for success. Emma has accomplished quite a bit in her avocation as an umpire, but also has accomplished quite a bit academically as well. And I am super pleased that she has agreed to join us this evening to share her thoughts on her own recipe for success. So Emma, if you wouldn't mind turning on your camera so people can see you.
Sure.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks.
So I'm going to turn it over to you to do your presentation, and when you are finished, I will come back on to facilitate some questions that the audience members may have, and so I will see you in a little while.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Well, really quick before I start, excuse the noises if there's any barking or anything. It's just my dog. So, all right. Well, first of all, hopefully everyone can see my my screen here, the presentation. So I just wanted to thank everyone for joining today. It's really an honor to be here and to chat with you. And Frankie approached me a while ago through another Softball Canada umpire who, his son, I worked with him in rookie ball. And originally she said Softball Canada was doing this webinar series on success and asked me if I'd be interested and willing to present. So I was a little bit flattered, but also confused because I've sort of the place that I am in my profession isn't exactly considered success. I'm still a level away from AA, so I've just been sort of hanging around for the last 3 seasons. But despite my reluctance to label myself as successful in my profession, and also despite my distaste for large group presenting, which it really helps that you guys are all sort of just like viewing this instead of I can't like see everyone's faces, so that's helpful. But I think it's important still to share knowledge and experiences and create that space for discussion. So I told you that I'd be happy to do that. So with that being said, I was sort of going over in my mind what I would say, and I was having a little bit of trouble because when Frankie and I first chatted, she asked me to share sort of just broadly what I'd done to be successful in officiating, specifically, you know, individual traits that I thought were helpful to me. And she pretty much gave me free rein with a general prompt, and I was thinking about it, and I thought that it would be too simple to just say, you know, do X, Y, and Z, or be this way, and you know, you'll be a successful sports official. So obviously everyone is different, and so I hesitate a little bit to paint extremely broadly, but I also don't know how my whole baseball umpiring career is going to end for me yet, so I didn't want to give some, you know, horrible advice like how to have a short minor league career and re-enter the world in your late 20s or whatever. So hopefully that's not what this ends up being. Anyway, so I made a short, somewhat cheesy slideshow presentation to go along with the content because I know that some people are visual learners, but I admittedly wrote this entire presentation before I created the slides. So hopefully they are still helpful to some folks. All right, so first I would like to sort of zoom out a little bit from the individual traits that help with success. Don't worry, I will get back to them, but I did want to acknowledge specifically that in my short umpiring career, there have been a fair number of things that I have had absolutely nothing to do with, and another not insignificant number of things that I've had very little influence on and that have helped me to get where I am today. So some of these things happened, you know, before I even thought about umpiring, and so I just wanted to point this out because I think that we enjoy believing that we as individuals, you know, have control over our circumstances, and you know, a lot of it is partially or wholly out of our control in a lot of scenarios. So not to diminish the importance of individual agency, in decision making, or to take away from people's personal triumphs, but I want to recognize and acknowledge that I benefited from a lot of opportunities that I have had no hand in creating. So even when I did make a lot of choices or decisions, take a lot of opportunities, I was only able to do that because the choices or opportunities existed for me. And the same quality and quantity of opportunities are not available to everyone. So there are definitely examples, though, of where my actions, decisions, behavior helped to create opportunities and propel me. And we can definitely I will get into some of those in more detail if people are interested, in asking specific questions later. Okay, so when I spoke with Frankie, she really was hoping that I would talk a little bit about myself and my career and things, and that's a lot of talking about myself, a little bit more than I'm comfortable with. So, and I know that we're going to have Q&A at the end. So with that being said, I'm going to address the idea of success from a little bit more of an abstract and theoretical point of view, but I promise it will be interesting. And I want to challenge everyone to have an open mind, and also please don't fall asleep. We'll start the slideshow, so hopefully that helps. Okay, so the first thing that I want everyone to do is I want you to imagine what a successful person looks like. So what they have or what they've accomplished, maybe. Now, I feel like what I'm going to say is a little bit of like a TED Talk opening line or something, or an introduction to like an expensive corporate workshop, but I'm going to say it anyway. We're going to explore in the rest of this presentation what success means and how you can reimagine it. So I wanted to start with this idea. Success is a practice and not a destination. I think we often frame success as an end goal. So like in the first, the first slide where he's climbing a mountain. So conquering the mountain, or, winning a competition, reaching some sort of pinnacle. And I want you to think of success more as a verb and not as a noun. So really think about the journey and not just the outcome. So the next 15 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about practicing and cultivating success, what that means and what it looks like. So the first concept that we'll address is the idea that success is practiced differently for everyone. So make sure that you define success for yourself. That might involve redefining what that means. And the strategy that I'm talking about isn't about lowering your standards. It's more about accepting a broader definition of success and valuing a wider range of skills, ambitions, and like we talked about before, journeys and outcomes. So make sure that you look for individual success, but also strive for community success. At least in my mind, it's not success if it only benefits you. So your practices, actions, and the outcomes of those are only, meaningful in context. So remember your context and remember your community, and whatever that means to you, right? Your community could be your family or your school or your city, your neighborhood, an identity group, or something else. But remember that everything that you do is connected to other people's lives, positively or negatively. So your success should be reflected in your communities. And finally, you're best at practicing success when you're healthy, when you yourself are healthy, mentally, physically, emotionally. So that looks like a lot of different things for different people, but some ways that you can do that is to have multiple passions and pursue a variety of interests. So put your energy towards different endeavors. Interdisciplinary approaches foster a much more nuanced understanding of the world, and thus lead to success. So it's the same reason why we encourage, we encourage young athletes to be to play multiple sports, right? We want them to be multi-sport athletes because not only does it allow for a broader skill development, but it actually benefits your performance in each of the distinct sports that you're playing to have played other sports. So it's sort of the same concept, and it also helps you avoid burnout and take care of yourself. So just remember that as well. All right, so some of you are probably wondering why I started with redefining success and looking at it from a broad perspective. That was, obviously less focused on the individual. Part of the reason I think when people are looking for the keys to success is that they're often looking in the wrong place or for the wrong things. And we have like this sort of industry dedicated to like self-help and self-improvement. You go into any bookstore and you see that there's shelves and shelves of books that are supposed to help you be more successful, be a better person, be healthier. And I think in some ways it's a really bizarre thing because it's very focused on the individual, and the idea that if this individual could just be a little less of this and a little more of this, that they would somehow find success in whatever they're trying to get better at, and however that might be defined. And what you end up with, I feel like, is that there's a lot of people who claim how to make people successful within a given set of social rules and parameters, but the consumers are really rarely able to absorb and practice all of those recommendations. And even if they are, they face an entirely different set of challenges in the real world that self-improvement books don't always address. So, challenges that are deeply ingrained in society, historically and culturally. So you end up with an industry that sort of feeds off of these inevitable failures that individuals, are not going to be able to meet these different definitions of success. And so I didn't want this presentation to just be sort of like a replication of that idea. But that being said, I do want to share with you some points you can focus on as an individual that might seem to be helpful in all situations and all spheres, not necessarily just officiating, no matter how you define practicing success. So, all right, as you've probably heard people say, that you've heard people advise you, be yourself, right? And of course, it's kind of a terrible cliche, but the reason that I included it here is because to me, it doesn't just mean, be genuine or be unique or be weird or whatever. Part of being yourself has to do with being confident and sure enough in yourself to, resist a lot of those social pressures around you. And so, not that all social norms are bad, but just to be conscious of their presence and their power, and then be selective in, the ones that you acquiesce to. And I always also like to say, not just be selective to the ones that you say, okay, that one's fine, that makes sense, I guess I'll do that. But also, if you don't like them, challenge them, and especially the ones that you really hate, I would say revolt against them. There's many ways to do this, of course, but whatever your method is to do those things is part of being yourself. So embrace that individuality, not in a manner that ignores the interconnectedness of our existence. That's just individualism, but embrace individuality as it relates to your own existence as a unique human. So that's what I mean by be yourself. So as you notice, there's like a little asterisk up in the corner by the title, and the reason I put that there is because if we're talking about individual traits, right? It does help if being yourself includes the following things. So I tried to break it down into like 8 different sort of tips, I guess, which was very difficult to do, but I've got the following characteristics and practices that I think have helped me to be successful. So the first one is treat life as a learning experience. And so even though I'm like kind of a nerd, as Frankie sort of alluded to, I don't just mean it in that way, you know, with formal education. But I think it's the important part about this idea is that you should always have an open mind and be ready to learn from people and places and events, and you know, just allow your thinking to evolve. That's to me part of what having an open mind is. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing things, but don't refuse to then seek out that knowledge. So this is where I put my plug in for reading. Notice the little books in the corner. So I am a big proponent of reading books. The second one that I've got for you is imagine. So, and the reason I say this is because I don't think there's ever been a time in history, whether you want to look at it from, you know, a really, really big perspective or a small perspective, but I don't think progress has ever been made without an idea of what, or sort of like an imagination of what something could be. So the ability to imagine fosters hope and you know, spurs people into action. And so I think it's important to realize that the rule in all societies is that foundational, structural, and cultural change is very slow. That's just how it is. But don't be discouraged. Use your imagination to see the big picture and to plan for long-term outcomes, and then let your imagination fuel you to fight as hard as you can to make that happen. And then the reason at the end that you know, I want to remind people that nothing is inevitable. There's not like this this sort of like arc of history. You have to make it happen. So that's what I've got for number 2. And then for number 3, I would advise to take calculated risks. So by this, I don't mean, you know, necessarily mean like do risky things. So I'm not saying that like speeding down the highway or placing a large bet is practicing success. I mean, I don't know, it might be, but I'm talking more about like social and cultural risks. So think outside the box, buck the trend, take the road less traveled. All of these sort of well-known slogans are meant to encourage calculated risk-taking that challenges social norms, right? So social risk-taking looks different for everyone, of course, and it can be really uncomfortable, but this is part of being courageous, which is another really important practice that sort of falls under this umbrella here with the third point. And I would just say that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's persevering in the face of fear. And some of the scariest things in life are taking those calculated risks, doing social risk taking. All right, so the fourth one is a little bit complex, but the sort of shortest way that I could put it is to be gritty. So grit is like this really complex combination of characteristics that has been relatively recently linked to highly successful people in multiple fields and endeavors across all personality types. And simply put, it's sort of like a fusion of deep passion with conscious, focused drive, commitment, and perseverance. So grit can be practiced and developed, and it manifests differently in each person. If you want to read more about it, which I highly recommend, it's really fascinating. There is this book about the concept of grit and how it relates to success, and I have it down there at the bottom. If you want to, whatever, screenshot it or write it down. It's called Grit: The Power of Passion and Perseverance by Angela Duckworth. She didn't pay me to put this in here. I just think it's a really fantastic book. So that's something that's really, I feel like, the way that she describes it, you know, is a really sort of interesting and full-scale way to understand sort of a lot of different traits that go into being successful. So the fifth one that I've got is don't ignore the details. So make sure that you're being deliberate and conscious and thoughtful and intentional in, I would say, everything that you do. It can be really exhausting to do that, but being detail-oriented is really important in all situations. So it doesn't mean, you know, fixating on minute or unimportant details. It just means it's more about like observing and absorbing fully so that you can really process and understand and react in the most informed way possible. So seeing details also allows for the fostering of really intense interest in the world around you. So it's just another way to really exist richly while also, you know, placing yourself in environmental context. All right, so the sixth one that I have is practice humble confidence. Confidence is built on other practices, right? So goal setting, risk taking, knowledge accumulation, things like that. But it's sort of this constant feedback loop where you build confidence by doing all those things. So I would say make sure that you know when you don't know, but be confident in your ability to figure it out. So always be humble and have humility. Even when you have the utmost confidence, you think you know it all, that's great, but you probably don't. And just remember, you know, you're just one person, you know, no matter how amazing you are. So put yourself, again, into context and always treat people with dignity. All right, the seventh one is to strive for balance. And to me, this means not getting too high or too low. It's okay to feel and feel deeply, but don't dwell on things. Always be ready to pick yourself up. Try to sort of allow your emotions to inform you, but not to consume you. And then balance other aspects of your life as well. So experience the world, whatever that means to you. You know, dedicate your time to different activities. Like we discussed earlier, interdisciplinary interests and skills are really paramount to understanding the world, existing in it in, you know, a healthy way, and then contributing to it as well. The particular formula for balance obviously is different for each person, but whatever that looks like for you, balance really will help immensely with the next and final best practice, which is, and I debated to put this in here because I know it's, I hesitated because I know it's extremely, complex. And so these aren't, none of these 8 things that I've listed are things that you can just, you know, say, oh yeah, that's a good idea and do them tomorrow. But I wanted to add it because happiness, like success, is a practice. And it's really heavily influenced, right, by the sort of fast-paced, instant gratification, competition-centered sort of world that we live in today. And part of the practice of happiness is doing things that you enjoy and slowing down to find joy. And so another part of happiness practice is taking care of yourself, as we discussed before. So make sure that you're holding yourself accountable, but also be kind to yourself. And I would say another part of that is surrounding yourself with a support network. So make sure you find people that you can connect with, that you can share experiences with, discuss thoughts, and really sort of foster that community. All right, so at this point, hopefully you're still awake, but also hopefully you're thinking about a few different things. So the first thing, right, is just from the beginning, more broadly defining success, looking at it sort of from different angles. And then the second thing is placing your personal success in context, right? We talked a little bit about community and things like that. And then the third one is some of the practices, right, that you can attempt to adopt or to incorporate into your success routine. All right, so the last slide that I have for us is I want to sort of address about success. I want to address this idea of struggle and failure. So often we sort of focus, right, like we said, on the outcome, and we really relish the ones that we think are objectively good, right? So you graduate, you get a job, you buy a house, you get a raise, you start a family, some things along those lines. But true to the themes of the presentation, I want you to focus not on the outcome, but on the journey. And sometimes the journey is filled with twists and turns and a lot of struggle, but the struggle in itself is infinitely more important than the outcome. So I will leave you with this really short parable as told by author Chinua Achebe. All right, so the story goes like this. The leopard meets the tortoise on a lonely stretch of road. The leopard has been trying to catch the tortoise for a long time. The tortoise is a trickster, and so obviously he has been escaping. And then on this day, the leopard finally catches up with him and says, aha, now I've got you. Prepare to die. And tortoise says to the leopard, can I ask you one last favor? And the leopard says, yeah, why not? The tortoise says, give me a short time to prepare myself for death. And the leopard looks around and says, I don't see why not. Go ahead. But then instead of standing still and thinking, as the leopard had expected, the tortoise began to dig and scatter sand all over the road, throwing sand in all directions with his hands and feet. And the leopard said, what's going on? Why are you doing that? And the tortoise said, I'm doing this because after I'm dead, I want anyone passing by this spot and seeing all the sign of struggle on the road to say, a man and his match struggled here. So according to Achebe, the moral of this short story is the importance of struggle. That, and I'm quoting him here, we can't guarantee the outcome. Nobody's going to say, if you struggle, you will succeed. It would be too simple. But even if we're not sure how it's going to end, we still have this obligation to struggle. So the parable is actually in reference to a much wider context, but and if you care to explore a little further, the book that it's from is called Things Fall Apart. Third reading plug. But I think it's very applicable to our redefinition of success. So hopefully that sort of helps you understand a little bit more about my approach as well. All right, thanks for listening, and take it away, Frankie.
Thank you so much. I am so glad that oh, you're supposed to stay with me. I am so glad. Thank you so much. That was so incredible. I'm so glad that I didn't give you very much to go by. I think that giving an artist free license to craft based on very little input is really powerful, and I'm so glad that it turned out the way it did. In fact, I had some questions for you, but I have different questions now that I've actually listened to your presentation. But
Sure.
first of all, I just want to acknowledge that our first webinar a few weeks ago had 4 very prominent people in the softball community that were available to answer questions, and many of the themes that they talked about, you actually struck a similar theme. And I think one that I would really like to highlight for all of those people who might watch later, who are in the starting years of umpiring, is to focus on the journey, as you called it. In the first webinar, some of our speakers talked about focusing on the process. Like, we get so excited for the next step that we forget to enjoy where we are. We forget to enjoy that moment, right? I thought that was such a key thing that linked the two together. And just that whole notion of interdisciplinary. I've worked in higher education for a long time, and traditional universities have a very difficult time trying to offer interdisciplinary studies to their students. You know, crossing over the silos of we're very traditional, like bio, chemistry, history, political science, and trying to merge some of those or to marry some of those subjects together so that students can have a much broader, in-depth experience. It's really tough. And I've never, ever heard anyone utilize that phrase in relation to an avocation. So, I mean, good on you for bringing a philosophical lens to this conversation. I think that's so cool. I've benefited from having a few extra conversations with you that all of the people listening have not. So some of the questions that I had were based on our other conversations, but one of the things I'd like to ask you is based something that you said today. So be selective in the social norms that you acquiesce to. I wrote that down as a quote. Have there been instances in your umpiring journey where you have acquiesced to a social norm?
Well, I guess maybe to answer the opposite of that question first. I think that in general, obviously, it's you know, it's a profession that's, at least at a lot of levels, and I know a lot of the folks here who are listening in umpire softball, but at least like in the baseball ranks, it's not very common for women to umpire it in the United States. It's much more common in Canada and some other places where they play baseball, but it's not very common in the United States. So I think that that's, you know, sort of one of the things where that's something that I've challenged a little bit. And I know when people say challenge, or even when I use the word like revolt, right, it sounds like such an active thing, but it doesn't always have to be active. And so, you know, when I was going through that sort of portion of the presentation, I wanted to highlight that it happens differently for everyone. So I would say that, again, to answer the opposite of your question, that's sort of something that I guess has been a bit of a challenge to a social norm. But then on the flip side of that, it's because you often, you know, not necessarily in this instance, but just in general, when you push for those things, you also get pushback sometimes. And so a lot of times you have to do a trade-off, right? You have to say, okay, I'm going to push for this, and then but I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to fight all the battles at once, right? Just even if it's just for self-preservation and sanity and things like that, right? You know, you want to make sure that you know, you're approaching that from that perspective too, because I know a lot of times when people are really sort of in tune to that kind of thing, they're like, you know, I want to go after everything, and you know, it's I don't like the phrase very much, but it's sometimes a choose your battles kind of instance. So yeah, I would say there's definitely things where I've said, you know, I'm just gonna go with the flow for this one.
Mhm. Right. So have there been social norms you've revolted against, to use that word?
I guess some people might consider it a revolt. I mean, it's pretty uncommon, but like I said, to me, it didn't seem like that in a lot of ways. It just seemed like it was something that I really loved doing,
Right.
and it was a cool opportunity, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go for it. Let's see what happens. And maybe it was because the magnitude, which, like, in a lot of ways, it's really big and really small, right? Some people don't care about baseball; they could care less, and some people, it's really important to them. So, and there's all sort of other aspects too, but maybe I just didn't realize sort of how unique it was. But yeah.
We do have which is a great question. We have a couple, thanks, Chris. We have a couple of questions in the chat. Like, how did you get involved in umpiring? Did you play?
Sure. Yeah, so I played a little bit of baseball growing up. I also played other sports, mostly soccer. But I played like all the way up until I was, I don't know, 21, I guess. That was the last time I played. And so I really enjoyed the game growing up, obviously. But the very short version of how I got interested in it, in umpiring specifically, was that when I was at university, I went back to my local little league and wanted to make a little bit of money in the summer. So I did some little league games, no training. I didn't know what I was doing. And then the next year after I tried that, I ended up seeing news that there was this girls' baseball tournament hosted in Florida. I live in Minnesota, so right up by you guys, and it's kind of far away. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. I'll give it a shot. I'll send the email and see if they respond. And so they responded. It was this organization called Baseball for All, and Justine Siegel responded and said, sure, come on down. I was like, okay, sounds good. So I hopped on a plane, went down there, did some games, had no idea what was going on. There were a bunch of fantastic people down there who helped me learn a thing or two about umpiring. And it so happened that Major League Baseball umpire development was there to put on camps for the kids who were playing in this tournament. And they saw me there and were like, hey, have you ever, thought about umpiring as a profession? Absolutely not. I'm just trying to make some money. And they ended up hanging out and talking to me for a little while, watching some of my games and, giving me tips, because I'm sure I was running the wrong way and looking at the wrong things and all that stuff. So, but then from there, they invited me to one of their camps. Ended up going to one of their camps while I was still in school, then went again after I graduated, and ended up going to umpire school.
Nice. When you and I first chatted, I'm just going to fill the audience. And when you and I first chatted, you had mentioned that after games, the media is oftentimes, Emma, they want your attention. They want to interview you. And you're happy to interview if they're going to interview everyone on the crew. But when you feel like the only reason they want to interview is because you're a woman and you were doing the game, you don't necessarily want to draw attention to that fact. I'm just wondering, how many women do you think have to be umpiring in a male-dominated sport for it to be just another game where you're just one of the crew members?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be sort of that, like, unique factor, I guess. And, I don't blame people for wanting to, capitalize on that and try to write a story and whatever. But, I would love for, as you said, if it wasn't a story and, if it was just another game, where everyone, it's the umpires and it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, right? So, that would be great. And I don't know what the number is. It's more than 2, but I don't know what that is. And so it's kind of, I guess, normalizing that. I'm not sure how many, what percentage is a critical mass or whatever you might want to call it. But you know, hopefully we see more coming down the road, and that would just that would be really great, and less interviews for me.
Well, we do have a comment in the chat, like through perseverance, there was finally a woman reffing the playoffs in the NFL. And that certainly got a lot of media attention. So stay the course, Emma, and someday we will see you behind the plate in Major Leagues. That's a comment that one of our audience members has shared with you. I'm wondering in your journey if there was ever, and not necessarily, this is not a gendered comment, this is actually just, has there ever been a moment in your journey where you came to a crossroads where you almost hung up the cleats, so to speak? Have you ever been in a situation where you thought, do I really want to do this anymore? This umpiring thing.
Question. I would say professional umpiring is, well, umpiring at any level is really, really difficult. It's just a difficult job. And I think especially professionally, a lot of people, you know, sort of, I guess, don't realize that, I mean, yeah, you're in professional baseball, and it's, in a lot of ways, it's really great, but in a lot of ways, it's really, really difficult too. And you know, even minus the gender aspect, like it's a lot of traveling, it's a lot of being away from your family, it's a lot of just being on the road, you know, being in a hotel, not having, you know, a home base, place to go. You know, the season gets long, and sometimes the weather's really bad. It's either really, really cold or it's really, really hot. You know, and so there's all those challenges too. And, you know, so I don't know that there's been a time that I can pinpoint where I was like, this is it, you know. But there's definitely been struggles along the way, just purely from an umpiring as a profession perspective. And so it definitely is not without its sort of ups and downs and bumps in the road, for sure.
That's so interesting when people are on that path to perhaps making a career out of officiating. A very good friend of mine just became the first Canadian referee in the NBA, and he would say the same things that you just said. The journey to actually getting there, just the travel and I'm going to Hicksville, Ohio for a game, like, you know, and just it takes a toll, especially when you have other things, as you said, striving for balance, when you have other things going on in your life. So that would be interesting to ask you. How important have mentors been in your journey, and how have you gone about selecting one?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's a lot of ways that you could sort of look at that. I don't know if there's any question that I'll answer just straight up, but there's a lot of ways that you can look at that. I guess in umpiring, you know, for I guess if you sort of just stay on that professional course, there have definitely been a lot of people who have really helped me out. And it started way before I got into professional baseball. So like I said, when I was at that all-girls baseball tournament, the people there had no idea who I was, had never met me, and they were spending all this time with me, you know, trying to help me improve. You know, one of them gave me her plate shoes. Like it was just, I was blown away. I was like, oh, this is great. You know, these people are really fantastic. And you know, so that kind of stuff has happened. I've gotten a lot of guidance from folks like that who have been outside of professional baseball. You know, to name a few, I guess. And my apologies if anyone's watching this and I don't name you. But especially who were at that tournament, Perry Barber and Isla Bell Carcel, Mona Osborne. And then when I went to the umpire camp, I went while I was still in college with a couple other women, and one of them was Jen Powell, which many of you may know, and she's been a really fantastic mentor to me. She went to umpire school the year before me, as did Annie Monticello, also another fantastic umpire, fantastic person. So the two of them have really helped me out a lot. Yeah, and then, you know, just being in the game, there's a lot of people who have really just been beyond kind to me. So, you know, just away from sort of like the how to umpire aspect of it, you know, it's been really great to sort of make those connections. And but like I mentioned before, there have been a lot of specifically a lot of women who have helped me out along the way too.
Which is really helpful. That's what we're trying to encourage up here too. We have a question in the chat from somebody who's wondering what you could share with the audience about what typical travel may look like length of drives between games, things like that.
Yeah, so it really depends on what league you're in. And so for example, the very first league that I was in was rookie ball, which, excuse me, I'm not exactly sure how that is being organized this year, but essentially, if anyone's sort of been following the levels of minor league baseball previous to this coming year, rookie ball is the lowest level. It's the Gulf Coast League and the Arizona League. And so essentially what they do is they play mostly on backfield in the spring training complexes. And so as they sound, both of them are in one state. They're each in one single state. So the traveling is pretty minor. And I was in the Gulf Coast League in Florida. And so we would travel like once every week, usually. We'd stay in a city, we'd do 6-7 games, and then we'd head out to the next city because they ended up just being pretty close to each other. So like the longest drive we'd have to do for a game would be like 2 hours. So we'd just commute from that hotel out and then move on to the next city. But then when you get into sort of travel leagues, I guess they might be called, anything really above rookie ball, some of the drives can be pretty long, and usually you're only in the same city for like 3 to 4 games. Sometimes you'll be there for a homestand, but usually you're only there for 3 to 4 games. So you're traveling every 3 or 4 days, depending on the league and depending on what your schedule looks like. Typically the drive is anywhere between an hour and a half to, I don't know, the longest drive we made was maybe 13 hours, but it was I think that one was on an off day, so which a great way to spend your off day. But you know, most of them are not like that. I would say the average is probably for most leagues is probably 4, something like that, 5. I don't know. It can be a lot of driving, you know, but it on the positive side, it's a really cool way to see the country. So
awesome. Well, I think we've addressed all the questions in the chat. And just before we close off, I just wanted to say thank you so much again. I think the contextualization of success and what that might look like. That's so funny that you started with what does success look like to you, and I wrote down content and happy. And I thought it was funny that your 8th individual characteristic of success is to be happy. I mean, really, you know, for me, if they look content and they're happy, then I mean, what more could you ask for? Oh, looks like we have one more question. Hang on.
right. Oh yeah, no problem. I've got time.
Oh, just a comment, sorry.
Okay.
Just a thanks, Emma. Sorry. But I did think it was funny that your first trait, treat life as a learning experience, and as Frankie knows or alluded to, that I'm a nerd. I think that we should embrace that, because the people that treat their avocation like they're thirsty for knowledge, like, okay, those of you who are listening, when I met with Emma a couple of weeks ago, she showed me this spreadsheet of this chart of like all of the positions and where the positions go depending on where the ball is hit. And I just thought, like, it's those kind of people that put our craft into a different shape for learning that it really just speaks to those are usually the people that are really successful, right? And those tools can become so helpful for other people. But I really enjoyed your presentation, and what I am very grateful for is some of the themes that came out tonight are a perfect segue into our next month's set of webinars. So you talked about health, striving for balance, taking care of yourself and being kind to yourself. I just love that, because March's theme for Softball Canada's webinars is fitness and self-care. So that's just an excellent segue into that. Emma, thank you so much for your thoughts tonight. And for those of you who attended this evening, thank you very much for your attendance and for your comments and questions. And join me on March 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern with Trevor Topping, who will be our first speaker on fitness and self-care. So Emma, thank you kindly, and I wish you all the best this summer.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Frankie, and thanks everyone for showing up. Hope you had a good evening.
Right on.